But let me begin with something that happened back in 1987. It seems like a lifetime ago uh, when I think about it. It's not been all that long ago. In 1987, the Rockdale County High School basketball team, the Bulldogs in Conyers, Georgia, won the state basketball tournament, the state championship in whatever class they were in the month of March. Oh, March is here. So March Madness is on a lot of people's minds. I only just have March Madness because I get mad my team's never in March Madness. But so this is a good one. They had 21 wins and 5 losses during the season, and they swept through the tournament. In the championship game, they were behind until they rallied at the very end, come from behind victory, took the state championship. About 2 months later, the authorities that be in Georgia took away their crown, took away their championship. They had used an ineligible player in the first game of the tournament that they had to win for 45 seconds.
Oh my goodness.
45 seconds. An ineligible player had played. So they took away their trophy, took away their championship. Had to forfeit all 5 postseason wins. Their coach, Coach Cleveland Stroud, explains the why of all of this, and I'm quoting him. This first came out in the New York Times article back in '87. He said this: "We didn't know he was ineligible at the time. We didn't know it until a few weeks ago." And he's talking in May, so I didn't find out for several weeks after the tournament. He said, "We didn't know until a few weeks ago." He went on, he said, "Some people have said that we should have just kept quiet. Now you know why they lost the championship. They reported this instance themselves. Some people have said we should have just kept quiet about it. That it was just 45 seconds and the player made no impact on the outcome of the game." But he went on to say this. He said, "But you've got to do what's honest and right and what the rules say." And this is important. Listen to this. He said, "I told my team that people forget the scores of basketball games, but they don't ever forget what you're made of." It's pretty incredible. In fact, that's pretty unusual. Who knows how many times something like this has happened in the arena of sports. Just nobody says anything. An unusual story, yes. But why is it unusual? Because this just doesn't happen. We live in such a crooked, perverse world that people will get away with whatever they can get away with by being dishonest. You see, unfortunately, today, lying is just considered to be normal. People think everybody lies, so it doesn't matter. But you see, lying is not new. It's not just a symptom of our society. In fact, it stretches back to the very creation of man. When Satan lied to Eve, and then she misconstrued the truth, probably didn't fully understand it, Adam did, the whole race is plunged into sin, and we've all suffered ever since. Lying has always been a problem. Think about it. The 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not bear false witness, right? Paul wrote about it. Ephesians 4, verse 15, he says that we should speak the truth in love. That wasn't a suggestion. And then a few verses later, in verse 25, he said we ought to, everyone, speak the truth to our neighbor. And James talks about it too. And that's where we're at tonight. In James chapter 5, verse 12, and now he's shifting back from where he was last week. Well, he keeps going back and forth. These major themes just keep revolving through. In chapter 5, verse 12, he's talking about being honest. People say honesty is the best policy. For those of us who know the Lord, honesty is the only policy. Here's where it all came from. I've already alluded to it. Jesus said this in John chapter 8, verse 44. He says, "You are of your father the devil." Now he's talking to the Pharisees and those that had rejected him, that they were religious, but they weren't godly. He said, "You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources. He is a liar and the father of it." Wow. So every time in this world somebody lies, it traces right back to him. Now, for those of us that know the Lord, he's not our father. He wasn't addressing us. He was addressing those that did not know him or believe in him. But it does help us understand the gravity of what he's talking about. The message then in James chapter 5 and verse 12 is very clear. He says, "But above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no, no, lest you fall into judgment." James 5, verse 12. We'll come back to it. James is saying in this one verse a very simple thing, that we should always speak the truth. Always speak the truth. But he also gives us some principles to apply to make sure that we are able to do that. It's difficult for us to be truthful all the time, because we live in a world where nobody else, it seems, around us is truthful. And we live in a world where, well, it's just so easy to follow suit. Do what other people do. Do what we see on the television. Do what we see, people in authority or people that are popular or well-known do. And so, the first principle is this. James says, when you speak the truth, speak concisely. That means make it short and make it sweet and make it right. Don't add anything to it. And so in verse 12, the first thing he says to us is that we should speak the truth plainly, concisely, without attempting to confirm what we say to be truthful. If you speak the truth all the time, nobody's going to question what you say. But if you try to confirm what you say in some way, then people might have the idea, well, he or she doesn't always tell the truth. Only people that don't always tell the truth, only those that are not completely honest, have a need to try to convince other people that what they're saying at the moment is the truth. And so James says, but above all. Why does he say above all? He's talked about some pretty heavy stuff in chapter 4 and leading into chapter 5. Worldliness, hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, uh, leaving God out of your life when you make plans, focusing on materialism instead of the Lord, all those things he's talked about recently and we have studied. He was saying to those people back in that first century of Christianity, there were Jewish people that had first come to know the Lord, that had then redispersed into the Roman Empire. He was saying those people, their biggest problem boiled down to this. So he says, above all the rest I've said, get this. My brethren, not only my fellow Jewish brethren, but my fellow Christians, do not swear. Now, we talk about swearing in terms of people using foul language. This is not what he's talking about. This is something a little different. I think you probably already got that. Do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath. So he is saying, don't attempt to confirm what you say by swearing an oath. I know, we've all heard people do it. When I was a kid, I learned that little thing that kids do, cross my heart and hope to die, if I tell a lie. That's an oath. I've heard people say, I don't know why, where I grew up, this stuff was, you heard it all the time. I heard people so many times say, I swear on my granddaddy's grave. Like, does that mean his granddaddy never swore? I don't know. I don't know exactly what that means. And his granddaddy isn't alive to confirm anything, and standing on his grave probably wouldn't either. And then there's the people that say, well, I'll swear on the Bible. Well, you don't have to believe what the Bible says to swear on the Bible. And one of my favorites is the people who used to say, I will swear on a stack of Bibles. As if one wasn't enough. They must really be heavy-duty liars if they needed a stack of Bibles, evidently. We kind of laugh at those things, and they seem a little trivial, but they're not trivial to God. And he's not talking about when you're a witness in a courtroom and you put your hand on the Bible. He's not talking about that. That's a formalized thing. Or when the president was sworn in and they didn't get the Bible up there to him and he missed the Bible, it doesn't somehow negate his, his oath. But the Jehovah's Witnesses in particular, I think, have a strong aversion to ever doing anything like that, even in court. That's not what he's talking. He's talking about how we use our words in everyday life and what our words mean. So, let's look at a couple of other places here. Oh, there's old, what's his name? Schweidheim?
No, that's the confession was the Schleidheim confession.
Okay, this guy's name was?
Michael Sadler.
Okay. I see it there now. Don always has all these little things in his slides you got to look for. He has his name on the book. That's from last week. And remember what the last one was in the confession from the Anabaptists? The oath. No oaths should be taken. All testimony must be truthful. They had a problem back in the 1500s too, just like we do. They took it a little bit more seriously probably than we do. And they may even included, taking an oath in the court. I don't know. I saw that last week, and I asked Don for that slide because I knew where we were going this week. So a little reminder from history there. Here's where we need to go. Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 to 37. Jesus is speaking. He says, again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely. He's referring to the Ten Commandments. This is in the Sermon on the Mount, very early in his ministry. He's interpreting the law. You have heard that it was said of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. Okay. But I say to you, do not swear at all. either by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, nor shall you swear by your head. I mean, we think it's funny to say swear on your granddaddy's grave, okay? They had some weird ones too, okay? Neither swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. Well, that was before the days when we could actually do that, maybe, at least for a little while. But let your yes be yes and your no be no. Where did James get it? His half brother and Lord, Jesus, said it first. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. Or as the old King James says, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Okay, it's yes, yes, no, no. Whatever is more than these is from who? The evil one, the father of lies. He's the source of what produces that. So, speak the truth. Don't add anything to it. Don't attempt to confirm it. But then number two, do this because a confirming statement is simply a tool to deceive somebody. Think about it. A stack of Bibles and your hand on it does nothing but try to convince somebody you're telling the truth who doubts what you're saying and probably have reason to. We don't want to deceive. And the only way we can not deceive is to be so truthful and so honest that people never need us to confirm it. So, speak the truth concisely, the first part of verse 12. Then number two, principle number two, speak the truth consistently. See, most of us do a pretty good job of speaking the truth most all the time. Until push comes to shove somewhere and we kind of just sometimes have a little struggle with it occasionally. I can remember all those times when I was a young man growing up and I never directly lied to my parents, but there was plenty of times I didn't tell them the whole story either. You know what I mean? You've been there, right? I see some people shaking their heads. We need to tell the truth and tell it consistently in every situation and circumstance. And that means telling the truth without hypocrisy, without pretending, without acting like something happened that didn't, without painting a picture that isn't reality. Not being a hypocrite. Again, James 5:12, but let your yes be yes and your no, no. Just as James probably heard Jesus say that. I no doubt. If he wasn't there when Jesus said that, Jesus probably said it more than once. He probably did hear it somewhere, whether it was at the Sermon on the Mount or not. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. What I want to direct your attention to, let me see your sheet, Don. I don't know if I put it on there. Okay. On your sheet, that just says, okay, let me do this before I get there. I got ahead of myself. But I'll point it out here, even though I'm getting ahead of myself, where it says, okay, where it says, let your yes be yes. That's a present tense verb in the original, which means do it all the time. A present tense in the Greek means it's an ongoing, consistent practice that's being spoken of. So he's not just saying, let your yes be yes on this sort of subject and tomorrow maybe not. Always, all the time, all the way through your life, let your yeses be yes, your nos be no. Be consistent. Now, we can follow up with a couple of verses I already mentioned in the introduction. Paul says in Ephesians 4:15, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things unto him who is the head, Christ. Speaking the truth consistently is evidence of maturity in Christ. Think about it. You ask a 3-year-old, did you do such and such? And they know they did it, and you saw them do it, and they'll say, no, I didn't do that. It's natural because of our fallen nature. So as we come to know the Lord and as we grow in the Lord, our ability to be consistent with the truth should expand, should grow, become more and more consistent. And it will, if we're following Him at all. Therefore, putting away lying, how do you speak the truth, first of all, if you're a liar? You got to stop lying. Put away the lying. Then everyone speak the truth to his neighbor. See, we learn to lie out of habit. It starts at a young age. It's natural to our fallen nature. We absorb it. We see it. It gets to the point where we just think it's normal. It's okay. And at some point, we've got to renounce it. At some point, we've got to realize it. And we've literally got to stop lying. And if you stop lying, what are you doing then? If you stop lying, you're telling the truth. It's like the teeter-totter thing, you know? We'll come back to these two verses at the end, so keep this in mind. Speaking the truth in love, you might want to jot that down, at least the reference. We will discuss it at the end here in a few minutes. You don't have to do the whole verse, but speaking the truth in love is what you need. Ephesians 4:15. And then in verse 25, speak truth with his neighbor. Speak truth with his neighbor. Ephesians 4:25. Hold those two thoughts. So, without hypocrisy and all the time. And I already covered that all the time already. But let me add something to it. If we're going to tell the truth all the time, we need to understand a little bit about the kind of lies that we just naturally gravitate to. Sometimes we just intentionally deceive other people for our own purposes. Or we, at other times, selectively use information. Don't tell the whole story, like I mentioned that we often do in youth. Other times, we exaggerate the real truth. There's various ways in which we play fast and loose with the truth. So, in deceit, selective use, not telling the whole story, exaggeration. Those are all things that fall into the same category. Here's an interesting thing. Back in 1996, a social scientist, her name was Bella DiPaolo, did a study interviewing people in a controlled environment, a segment sample, and I don't know how she ever arrived at this because they probably all lied to her, but I don't know. Anyway, she came up with this. She said the average person, and I'm not using the exact quote here, but she concluded the average person lies to about 1/3 of the people they speak to. I mean, 1 out of every 3 people they speak to, they've lied about something. Doesn't really surprise me all that much. The volume of it does. But you know, I remember this guy I went to high school with, and he'd always just tell the most fantastical things. Things you really? But the thing about it was, he was a consistent liar. Every time he opened his mouth, he was lying. So after a while, you didn't pay any attention to what he said. I don't know. He comes to my mind. I could tell you about a few people that were much older, up into their 90s, that couldn't tell the truth either, because I don't know if they ever did. But they were more or less people exaggerated. I guess that's what that guy did. So, Let's go to number 3. We covered this already. I just got it out of sync a little bit. There's the present tense. Number 3, speak the truth reverently. Reverently. Now, what do I mean by that? Does that mean that we have to have a certain tone in our voice when we speak the truth? Do we have to act really innocent? No, that's not what I'm talking about when I say reverently. I mean with an understanding that God is God, and we answer to God. That's reverence. Respect for who He is. So, why? Well, because James says in the latter part of verse 12, so you will not sin. So let's look at it. Above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth. By the way, I failed to mention this. The Pharisees and the Jews of that day, if they swore, they said, I swear on the earth, they didn't think they had to keep that truthful. If you swear on the earth, everybody in the context of their culture knew it wasn't true. Or if they said they were going to do something and swore on the earth, that they didn't have to keep it, the oath. That's why Jesus had all those lists of things. He said, don't swear on this, this, and this, because they had this thing, they wouldn't swear on the Lord's name, but they would swear on the heaven, they would swear on the earth, If they swore on heaven, that was on God's name. But if they swore on the earth and things about the earth, they didn't have to keep their word. But here he says, do not swear either by heaven or by earth. I don't care whether you're swearing on God's name, like you're going to answer to Him, or whether you're just, you think you can get away by swearing on something else. It doesn't matter, either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no, no. Why? Lest you fall into judgment. Now, we all know, and we've talked about this multiple times, he's speaking to Christians, he's speaking to brothers and sisters. He's not talking about eternal judgment, because we will not fall into eternal judgment. We're not going to be condemned. We're not going to spend eternity in hell. We're going to spend eternity in hell. God's promised, if we put our faith in Him, jot down Romans 5:1. It's the one I always think of. There's therefore now no condemnation to them that are in Christ Jesus. No verdict. That's what condemnation means. No verdict. You're, cast into hell, or whatever the punishment is there. So he's talking about the judgment seat of Christ, and we have seen this over and over. In fact, back a few verses, in verse 9, he said, do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Not talking about eternal condemnation in hell. He's talking about loss of reward. That word condemned means a judgment against you is going to be pronounced. And the judgment, of course, of the judgment seat of Christ is not punitive. It's not punishment. It's just loss of the rewards you could have had. It occurs at the rapture of the church. We've had this chart up quite a few times. And just to note that for you again. So, speak the truth reverently. Why do people lie anyway? Why do they exaggerate? Why do they leave things out? Why do they deceive? That same lady who determined that people lie to 1 out of every 3 people they talk to also listed the reasons why she thought people lie based on her research. She said some people lie to boost their self-image. Some people lie because they're seeking influence. Sometimes they lie to protect their privacy. I mean, they just don't want anybody to know, something they're not proud of or whatever it is. And there's a lot of people just lie because, it's just easier to get by the moment or the circumstance or the conversation. Just becomes habitual. So there's the 3. Speak the truth concisely, consistently, and reverently. Let me just end with this. Sarah Darling. Now, Diane's my only darling, but Sarah Darling. Darling's her last name, okay? Sarah Darling. A lady by the name of Sarah Darling drops some money into the cup of a panhandler. When she did so, somehow her engagement ring fell off into the cup. She didn't realize it at the time. Sometime later, she realized her engagement ring is gone. Billy Ray Harris was the panhandler. He saw the ring immediately. He actually took and had it appraised, and they said it was worth $4,000. And he was going to sell it, but he couldn't. Something in his background, something in his upbringing, he couldn't bring himself to sell it. So the next day, when Sarah Darling came back, suspecting maybe it fell off in the panhandler's cup, he was waiting there to give her back her engagement ring. As a reward for his honesty, Sarah gave him all the cash she had on her. And then she set up a site, I guess in one of these crowdfunding things or something, set up a site for receiving donations from strangers who wanted to help reward Harris's honesty. $190,000 poured in. Guy made a pretty good trade, don't you think? He gave up a $4,000 sale or less for the lady's ring and got rewarded with $190,000. You know, we're not going to do quite as well in business if we're honest as maybe somebody who's not honest. But in the long run, there's a much better reward. That's what we got to keep in mind. So, some applicational questions before we end. Here's the first one. You might want to jot this down in the back of your sheet. How can we speak the truth when we want to protect our privacy?
How you doing today?
Well, one way you can do it is just say, that's none of your business. Most of us are far more diplomatic than that, especially if it's somebody that, we don't want to offend somehow. That'd be one way. You got any ideas?
I say hanging in there.
I had a professor in seminary that told about going to one of these after church on Sunday potluck dinners, and a lady had made a pie, and sometimes the ladies get really into the bacon, and she was so proud of I've had people at those dinners, I've had people bring me pies and cakes and set before me because they want me to taste theirs, and I appreciate it, and I love them all, and I never had this happen to me. But on this particular occasion, he said he tasted this lady's apple pie. It was the worst apple pie he'd ever had. Just like he could hardly get a bite down. And sure enough, the lady said, well, how do you like my pie? And he responded, well, lady, or whatever her name was, so-and-so, a pie like yours just doesn't last long around my house. That was great thinking. I don't know how truthful he was. He kind of, I think the Lord might want us to be a little bit more truthful than that. How would you respond to that?
It went quickly.
Does anybody have any suggestions, serious suggestions?
It tastes a little different than what I've ever had.
I've had what? I'm sorry.
It tastes a little different than what I've ever had before.
Yeah, that'd be honest. I think I have had people, at meals or whatever, saying, how did you like such and such? And they always invariably ask about some dish that I just didn't like, period, and never have, I can't think of what one would be anymore. I pretty much have learned to eat whatever someone puts in front of me, but I remember at times having to say this, and I would say, well, you know, that's just not a dish I like normally, but I really appreciate it. And you know, you cook, you know, this over here you fix was wonderful. You know, so but be honest. You know, that's the challenge we have. Uh,
People can tell when you're doing that too. You have to be careful.
hmm. But you know, this doesn't seem to be an earth-shattering situation. But you see, here's how we fall into the trap of doing what the world does. So think about that one's one you may have to think about for a while. How can we speak the truth when it may hurt someone or cause them to react negatively? Lauren just keeps making these faces up here like it's just I don't know, it's impossible. I know we all feel that way. This is a tough one. Anybody have any ideas? Hmm?
I'm bad for changing the subject.
Well, you can ignore it, you can not answer it. That's not lying, you know. This first one about the privacy issue, that kind of speaks in terms of, you know, when Paul said, let every man speak truth to his neighbor. And the truth might be in that case, you know, I often have people ask me things I don't want to answer. You do too. I don't know. Maybe you guys got some advice for me.
Can we not say, I'd rather not say?
What's that?
Can we not say, I'd rather not say?
Yeah, that's a whole lot more diplomatic than saying it's none of your business. So there you go. That's a good answer. I'd rather not say. It just takes a little bit of effort to be truthful. As a pastor, I've had people ask me the doggonest things about other people. I don't know how many times I have people on Sunday. I say we need to be praying for so and so. They're in the hospital, and they would say, "Well, what's wrong with those so and so?" Well, I'm not going to tell them unless that person is telling everybody. And I don't know how many times over the years I've had to say, well, you know, I really can't say. It's simple. The truth of the matter is, when I went to visit the hospital, I never asked anybody what's wrong with them. Because I don't really need to know. I know they're sick. I know they got a problem. I'll be there to pray for them. I don't need that information. I don't want to be nosy and ask. I don't want to be put in a position where I'm tell somebody else when they don't want me to. So I don't ask. Most of the time they'll tell me anyhow. So, you know, but I've had plenty of times that people say, well, what's wrong with so-and-so? And I've had to look at them honest as the day is long. You know, that's probably an oath. I'm sure that was an oath now that Laura caught me. But plenty of times I've had to simply say, I don't know. And they look at me like, you're the pastor. You don't know what's wrong with him? I'm not a doctor. And sometimes I would say, you know, when I visit someone in the hospital, I don't ask them what's wrong with them. If they want to tell me, they can, and they didn't tell me, so I don't know. That's the easy one. This one here about hurting somebody, that's the other one where Paul said, speak the truth with love. If we can communicate to somebody we love them, we can be negative. If people know we love them, we can be confrontational in a kind way, and we don't lose that relationship. So it's important we love everybody, and that we be loving in how we communicate. We can say things like, well, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, and I want you to understand I've done the same thing, So I'm not innocent, and I love you anyway, but here's the truth. That's couched in love, I think. You guys think it's okay? It's not an oath, right?
Is there a Sarah Darling in this somewhere?
What was it?
Is there a Sarah Darling?
Oh,
Sarah
oh, well,
Darling in there?
no, we're going to forget about Sarah Darling. You all probably won't. But. Well, I've had a lot of fun tonight, and yet this is a very serious subject. I hope it's been helpful. Any questions, other comments before we close out?